I'm ready.
I love it. So good to meet you, man. Thank you for taking a minute out today. I love your work. I love your history. I'm looking forward to delving into it.
Sounds great.
So before we do that, in earnest, I want to know this. 5 years ago, this pandemic really changed a lot of the ways that technology and the way that we view our world and the way that we live. How did you get through that 2020 era, and how has it changed the way that you operate in 2025?
So it's funny because when it hit, I've been through lulls before, and we started in a recession. And there's been different economic cycles throughout the time. And when it first shut down, and when people said literally go home, I lasted for about 3 days, and then I came back to the office, just because I just couldn't take this locked up coopness stuff. It was great. We got to drive all over Colorado, and no one else was out. It was crazy.
Yeah.
But I didn't panic because essentially I knew that people were going to pause. And I know that it's great marketing advice. When everyone else stops marketing, you need to, ramp it all up. But when it was that dead, I realized, no, just finish stuff up, get things done, work with your existing clients. And then it all came back. Um, Everyone came back to the office in 2, 3 weeks. Um, we're more entrepreneurial in that way. And the thing that did change, which I think is healthy, is a lot of people did work from home for a long, 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 long time. We implemented just a work from home Wednesday. And it really breaks up the week. And people work from home. Me and my business partner, Lance, work in the office. And it's kind of back like, how we started the firm, just the two of us. So that's one thing that I think was probably a good takeaway. And the second thing too is, um, as being the owner, I have to do all the selling and stuff like that. And before COVID, I'd always be driving all over the place, meeting clients and all that. And that's all fun and good, but people are more conditioned to, and it's actually more efficient for that first meeting to be sort of a Zoom meeting, a get to know you meeting, because some of them are they don't really pan out in, uh, you don't even have the land yet, or your budget is unrealistic and stuff like that. Um, I guess you could have done that before with a phone call or something like that, but just a Zoom meeting really helps at least establish the connection, especially if they are going to be a client.
I love that with telehealth during that time because it's just, you got to load up, you got to drive to the appointment and wait in a waiting room and do all of this. It's just, there's so many things that are logical that have stuck since that time period.
Yep, yep, totally
You know.
agree.
So let's get to the heart and soul of what you do on a daily basis as both an architect and an entrepreneur. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of kids. It's at a school. They're 12 years old. It's career day, and the kids are all excited. And they're like, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" What's your answer?
My answer is we do advanced 3D puzzle making. We make puzzles, and they're not just flat on the table. We make them in 3D, and we make them in the computer first. And then it's not a puzzle that you have a picture to. You get to create that picture, and you get to create that picture with the client. And eventually that puzzle becomes something that's real and something that's built in, like the building that you're in right now. And there's a whole bunch of pieces that need to be done for builders to build that. So the puzzle making is just the vision, the aesthetics, the spacing, and all that. And that's one layer of a puzzle, and that's hard enough. So
Yeah.
if you like puzzles, if you like figuring things out, this might be a career that you want to choose, but it doesn't just stop there at that vision and that space planning and the aesthetics. Now that that vision is there, now you have to figure out all the systems. And the systems are everything from structure, which essentially means how the building stands up against all the forces, wind, snow, to the layers, how it protects against water, and then how you heat and cool it, HVAC, lighting, and all that. So that puzzle goes through iterations and it becomes in your computer and in your mind almost like a scaled down version of the real world that you can explore, move around, and create. And then eventually it does become something that you can live and work in.
What did you want to be at 12 years old or as a kid? What was your dream gig?
From the time I could draw, my parents and grandparents put big calendar sheets, if you remember those big calendar sheets,
Yeah.
flipped over the back, and I was drawing cities and architecture. And
Okay.
they said, "Oh, you're going to be an architect." It's all I've ever known. And it's been great.
Are you originally from Colorado?
Minnesota.
Minnesota. Okay. So take me back to the beginnings. Was this woven into your DNA to have these cities and buildings and all of these things in your mind, or was there seminal moments early on that made you develop into this life and this psyche you have?
Yeah, I think the environment definitely influenced me because, when you're really small, I was drawing wars of ants versus bees and pirates and, just cool, awesome kid stuff like that. So that mind to hand to paper was connected. And then the two kind of transition points were one, my mom always had home design books, magazines around because she loved it. So the love of it might have, passed down that way, but then also having those books just in the living room and those magazines in the living room helps. And then the second part was since my grandma saw this as well and then supplied it because grandpa had a State Farm shop. So they had those big calendars, and then I would just get the backs of it to do large pieces of drawings on it, which was really nice as well because everyone can have notebooks and notebooks are great. And I had just regular uh, you know, wide ruled things that I would draw libraries on and all that. But having that bigger sheets just allowed for more freedom and creativity. And once I drew on those, grandma would take us at least once a year, starting at, let's just say, age 10 or something like that. We would go to other cities and visit them like tourists. So Rochester, Minnesota is a mid-sized, decent city. It's a nice city, but we just go to a random town and you'd see the old, the courthouse or something like that, or go over to Wisconsin and see that. And from them, because I was doing this, they would just say you're going to be an architect. Obviously, like when you're 7 or 6, you barely know what anything is.
Yeah.
Um, and then in high school we had drafting classes, so I just took as many drafting classes as possible. And then from there, you apply to college, you get your master's degree, and you keep rolling.
So in my 20s, when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I started working at HNTB. And I was writing marketing proposals for them. And I remember I was working with the sports guys, and they were actually drafting the plans for that new stadium where the Broncos are at, and it
Ooh,
was fascinating. But the thing I remember, there was a couple key things, but I remember how much paper they went through when they printed all the plans. I would walk down in that room, and the printers were like, "Don't talk to us, don't mess with us, whatever." You couldn't horse around, but there would just be reams and reams of paper. It was unreal. Has that changed?
it hasn't changed. It hasn't
Okay.
changed. The only thing that changed is not drawing it by hand.
Right.
And that last iteration when I was in college, I knew that, of course some architects still did, but it was a dying breed. So I did one project, drafted out in hand. And it took me, I had to stay late at school. I would bring drawings home. So the efficiency on the computer, obviously worked, but the end result is a stack of anywhere from a small set of an edition, 17, 18 pages to a house, a modern, just a normal house, 30, 50 pages to 200, 200, 500 pages for a big commercial building.
Yeah. And you have to do that for everybody. So they were like making all of these for everybody whenever they got together, and it was amazing. There were a couple of guys. I remember we had a big arena. It was called Kemper Arena here in Kansas City.
Mm.
It's in the bottoms. It's no longer really, I mean, they've turned it into, I think, the American Royal, which is kind of like cattle and all of that. But that was our marquee place where all the games took place. And I remember the guy that did that refused to do anything AutoCAD, didn't do anything on the computer. He did everything by hand, and everybody would have to wait. And everybody did it because he was so good. They were like, "You're just gonna have to wait. I'm
Yep.
doing it by hand." So it's weird. That was in the late '90s, so I'm sure a lot of that's changed, but it was fascinating.
The other thing too, like the switch, because it's more efficient, but the way that things were planned back in the day made made it more efficient than the way things are planned now. So for example, if you go to any normal downtown, not a big downtown, but you probably still have these in the relics of the bigger cities, Kansas cities, things like that. I'm talking, Fargo size or smaller. Um, you'll notice that all buildings are essentially a rectangle. And they're in the downtown. They're 2 to 3 stories tall.
Yep.
And what that allowed is that you didn't have to go through all the planning and zoning stuff that you're going through now. And I'll touch on that in a bit. But what that allowed is that you knew I have a site. I'm going to fill it up with a rectangle. And now that that rectangle is the only shape that I can do, I can spend time on the facade and I can hand draft it and look at it and see the way the bricks are going to go. And everyone's seen intricate brickwork and all that. And everything is just made of brick, glass, and wood. That's all you had. Some steel, maybe, right? Especially if you went bigger. But it limited the materials too. So all of a sudden, you have a shape that's the same, you have materials that are the same, so you get these interesting facades. What has happened now is that the computer is way faster, all that, but you have a site and you have a million different rules, a million different overlays. You're trying to max it out. The building shapes, are no longer the same. They're all different. You have a million different products that you can pick from. Just imagine the amount of different toilets you could pick from 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Four.
Yeah.
Like maybe,
Right.
maybe two, honestly,
Sure.
maybe two. And then just multiply that by, oh, what's the glass mirror going to be? You're either going to, there's one you can buy, or you just have the glass person in town make it. You're like, glass here. And then here's your budget. And then he'd probably try to make it as cool as he could for that budget because, they want to move on from there. Get more referrals. So the complexity, the flexibility almost kills affordability and creativity on some sense. The
Yeah.
flexibility. I'm sure artists, I'm sure there's some quote that will come to me way too late after this interview, but like constraints are your freedom.
Yeah.
And if we had those constraints, and if it was clear cut and you didn't have to go through a planning review process that took you a year or two and you had to go to like 15 meetings to do it, you could spend that time instead on the design of the actual building. And I don't think the public really knows that because they see some of these modern stuff, and some people, modern isn't their flair. But the amount that architects and developers have to deal with the bureaucracy, I believe is correlated negatively to the amount of attention and care they can give to what the building feels like and looks like.
So I want to set this next question up this way. I'm a visual artist. This is one of my originals, and I've always loved museums. And I remember going to the Vatican, and you go through this enormous snaking trail to get to the Sistine Chapel. And I remember getting in there, and I was really blown away. And I also remember in DC there was a museum I went to where there was original Da Vinci's and original Van Goghs, and it was wonderful. It was mind blowing. What was that moment for you when you were a kid and you were in Minnesota and Wisconsin, going to these towns and kind of looking at all these structures? What building have you been in that absolutely blew your mind and made you think this is something?
There's a couple. Going back really early in Rochester, Minnesota, there was this building called the Plummer Building. It's probably 12, 14 foot tall. Stories tall. That 14 foot would be rather small. And I don't think it's on anyone's, bucket list of buildings to see or anything like that. But the history of Rochester is it was a normal Midwest nothing city. And then flood a flood slash tornado. I can't believe I'm either one or both at the same time wrecked the city. And they had the nuns of Assisi Heights. And that was another building. It was, an old monastery up on the hill, beautifully created, you know, over 150 years ago, and intricately done and well done. And the Mayo brothers were the doctors in town, and the nurses came down because they had to help a whole bunch of people and said, "Oh, we'll be the nurses. The nuns will be the nurses," and that's how the Mayo Clinic was born. And obviously the Mayo brothers kind of revolutionized hospitals because it was they thought like, hey, normally hospitals are just a place to go to die because your doctor that goes out to visit you because that's how it used to be done. couldn't do that. So if you're going to the hospital, it's basically end of life. And they're like, well, what if we really, really, really try hard to cure people and send people back out of the hospital, right? And it's grown up. If people know about famous hospitals, Mayo Clinic is one of, probably five, a handful that people know, St. Jude's and, whatever the other ones are. Um, so the town is really well done, and that building was iconic, both of those buildings. But then when I got older, going into, I visited New York City and going into the Guggenheim, which
Yeah.
is that circular building, and realizing, oh, you just go up the elevator and then you walk down in a circle, slowly. The simplicity, but the elegance of that
Yeah.
form, and that it was a new modern take. And if anyone knows Frank Lloyd Wright, his style was more prairie style. And he made that building essentially because people said, "Oh, you're just prairie style architect. You can't do anything modern." And then he does one of the best modern buildings that anyone would recognize or classify as modern, and probably would be a definition of modern architecture if you opened up the dictionary. And I'm sure it probably is. So that would be the maybe most iconic. That one was when I was older. But that one really hit me too.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's really what I was going after was that kind of building. And I was thinking about the Guggenheim. I love those that, like you said, everything's a square, a rectangle. Like you get away from that conventional thought and you kind of go into this almost MC Escher style world. It's so cool to think that can
Yeah.
actually take place. So, who's been that inspirational force, that hero for you to not only design, but to be an entrepreneur and to do all of this at this point in your life?
Um, it would be on the professional side, Frank Lloyd Wright. But on the personal side, it would just probably be my dad. Only because he worked at IBM. He worked at a corporate job, and corporate all of his life, worked there for, 30 years. But he didn't get a college degree, and he started off in the print shop with the blueprints. And he would just be one of the guys who, it, big sheets of paper would come out and he'd have to stack them and organize them. Um, and he moved his way up through the years to be and my grandma told me this at one time, and I knew that he was a manager, and he had a staff of 30, and they helped his department manage. Every part has a number to it. Every computer has a part to it. Every person has a part to it. So obviously there's a division that manages what all those numbers are, where everything is, and all that. And my grandma said, I don't think you know this, but your dad has risen very high for where he came from.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's wonderful. So, if you could meet anybody alive on the planet right now that's doing what you're doing and spend a little time with them, get in their head that might help you on your journey, who would you love to meet and talk to and hang out with a little bit?
uh, Frank Gehry. Do you
Okay.
know Frank Gehry?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Frank Gehry did the Bilbao Museum in Spain. He did a Guggenheim in New York, which never got built. Um, and it's not that his style's a little bit crazy, a little bit out there, which I like. And I really wish that Guggenheim in New York would have got built because it was on the east side on the waterfront. And it was just spectacular. And he's getting up there in age. And I would say Daniel Libeskind too, but I used to work for him, so
Yeah.
I kind of know him a little bit.
Yeah.
But that would be the one.
So, what gets you up every day to do this work? Not only to design, to come up with fresh ideas all the time, but to be an entrepreneur, take care of your soul, take care of your life. What is that energy for you every day?
It's one of the principles that we have here is to help build the world. And once you go through the process, and I mean the whole process at our firm, everything, there's the design, dealing with the city, dealing with clients, dealing with yourself, um, but also construction, dealing with contractors, subcontractors, and also being out in the field and literally pounding nails, is that you realize how difficult it is to build the world. And even myself would take it for granted back in these days, back in the day. It is so difficult for any of the projects that we're in to actually happen. And knowing how hard it is, Uh, but yet being able to make that is what inspires me.
What's been one of the most adventurous projects, maybe a challenging client that you did that you thought, oh man, there's no way that this is going to go through. It's going to be seamless. And it ended up being arduous, yet it was fruitful. It made you grow the most.
Called Kenwood Drive. It's in Boulder, Colorado. And the client threw everything at us. And it ended up being a beautiful glass home. It has a trampoline on the inside. It has a slide. It has a rock climbing wall. It has a pool on the inside, a pool on the outside. Um, and it was all exploring the unconventional, and making it work. And there was successes, there was failures, there was challenges, but it's really a great and beautiful project that contrasts, like it's a modern exterior, but if you really look at the house and see it, it's all about play and family.
Yeah.
And that's the essence and the heart of it. And that was really fun to do.
So if you walked into a room of all of your clients, everyone that knows you as an entrepreneur, a businessman, and you could tell that room, walk to the podium in front of that room and tell them one fun story. Maybe the first concert you went to, the best sporting event you ever witnessed, jumping out of an airplane, climbing a mountain, outrunning a bear. What would be a fun story that you would tell that room that would humanize you in a different way?
I would say I went on a golf trip with my buddies from high school. And we now do it every year. And this year they came to the Rockies. It just happened to be picked. And since this story, normally I wouldn't just talk about me, but the question was, what's a story about you? Normally I would try to relate it to them or something like that. But uh, but my friends that I've known forever, with guy friends, you can joke with them, you can make fun of them. It can get ruthless, but uh, we are doing whitewater rafting as part of our adventure, and it wasn't anything too crazy. Anyone could go on it. But I go, I'm gonna save your life. I'm gonna save your life. And just being ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
Well, two guys, are going over the edge. I grab one guy, pick him back in, and the other guy is all the way out with just his toe hanging off the edge, and he's like bobbing in the water and all that stuff. And one of my friends just has his basically his toe and his part of his ankle and just like holding him so that he's floating inside of the boat. And I reach over and I grab him and bring him up. And then the friend helps once he gets, close enough. Uh, and we're going over the white waters, and the guide let me stand on top of the boat, in the front, like holding on. They call it riding the bear, I think, or something like that. I can't remember the terminology, but like there was you get through some rapids, there's a little peaceful part, and then you can see the rapids again. And I go, guys, this is so blissful. This is so peaceful. And then they just looked at me and like, what are you talking about? Like there's more rapids coming. We just went through rapids. And I was like, yeah, but we're on the water. It's in we're with friends. We're in the trees and all that. And I think it's that balance between uh yes, things are tough or crazy, but you're doing them with friends or family, and you're doing something fun and adventurous. I think that's what life is about.
I dig it. So, of everything that you've done in your life, accomplished and evolved to, what are you the proudest of?
Being there for my kids,
Yeah,
being a father.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, everyone you work with, your partners, in a business sense, all of your clients, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think I'm someone just trying. I
Yeah.
think I'm just trying and grinding, but not in the negative sense of, like it's up at midnight, working alone and all that. Um, I I think that's a perception of myself. I just try.
So, coming from the flatlands of Kansas City, I'm always curious. Every time I leave Colorado, I'm like, do the locals ever get tired of the majesty of seeing mountains?
Never. Never. I don't know what it is about it. It's maybe like seeing a great piece of art.
Yeah.
Um, people that have those oceanside views, I've never heard them getting sick of it. People who have, apartments in New York City, I've never heard them get sick of it. Driving, in from where I live is the next town over from where the firm is. I never get sick of seeing the mountains.
I love it. So if anyone wants to hire you, they have questions, they want to reach out, they want to explore any of the good business, where's the best place for them to go?
You can email me at akg@f9productions.com or just go to f9productions.com.
Okay. Alex, this has been wonderful. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for taking some time out. Thank you for your story and best of luck with everything.
Thank you, Joe. Your questions were top notch.
Thank you.
I don't know.